Sup, you beautiful bastards. Hope you're having a fantastic Wednesday. Welcome back to the DeFranco Show, and let's just jump into it. And the first thing we're going to talk about today is the story around Cosmopolitan magazine, a magazine that I'm unsure exactly how popular it is. I just know that whenever I'm at a grocery store, whoever is on the cover is staring at me while I'm waiting in a line that is far too long for a store that has 20 registers. Why do you only have 4 people on them, Target? But my impatient rage aside, Cosmopolitan is in the news because Walmart has now deemed it too sexy. And because it is just too sexy, they are pulling the magazine from checkout aisles in 5,000 stores across the country. Walmart's saying in a statement, Walmart will continue to offer Cosmopolitan to customers that wish to purchase the magazine, but it will no longer be in the checkout aisles. While this was primarily a business decision, the concerns raised were heard. And according to reports, it appears that the concerns that were raised by Encino, the National Center on Sexual Exploitation, who said in a statement, Cosmo sends the same messages about female sexuality as Playboy. It places women's value primarily on their ability to sexually satisfy a man, and therefore plays into the same culture where men view and treat women as inanimate sex objects. Also adding that this quote-unquote hypersexualized magazine targets young girls because they include former Disney stars on the cover. This, along with all the other headlines on the cover involving sexual activity. Now, in the note of this is sexual exploitation, I do have an issue with that because what some people call exploitation, others would call empowerment, right? If you're doing as you please with your body, all of a sudden you pop on this cover, who cares? And as far as my opinion on this, I feel like some of you might expect me to really come down on Walmart, but no, I mean, they're a private business, and if they think that, you know, throwing out Cosmo in the checkout aisle in front of everyone that's not specifically looking for it, yeah, it's not really that big of a deal. What I'm really fascinated by is how this is going to affect the business model for Cosmopolitan. I mean, physical copies of magazines are already on their way out, so moving this to a completely separate area, removing it from it being like an impulse purchase when you're at the store, I'm fascinated to see what the numbers are going to be. How big of a drop are we talking about? Reportedly, Cosmopolitan has been one of the most profitable magazines for its publisher, Hearst. But just to give you an idea of the single copy crisis they're in, reportedly when talking about single copy sales from newsstands, from checkout counters, December 2014, they were getting over 576,000 copies sold. But then by December 2017, we're talking about only 190,000 plus copies sold. That's a massive drop. That's just the market being the market. Now we're talking about one of the most trafficked stores in the country, removing you from the ideal spot to convert a sale. That said, I am also slightly disappointed because Cosmopolitan covers give me at least a little bit of joy while I'm stuck in a line, so the next time in a Walmart, maybe I won't have that. Cosmopolitan has some of the best, worst front cover headlines. Things like, if your boobs could talk. And then my personal favorite, vagina, are you okay down there? But ultimately, I don't think this is a big deal. If this is really about protecting the children, then, I mean, it's not. It's not going to. If you have issues with a Cosmopolitan cover, there are far worse things every single place on the internet. And I also feel like for Walmart and any other store, those diminished sales of magazines, it makes it so much easier to make the decision to move it to a different place for something that's going to sell better. But that's my personal takeaway. Then in What Are You Doing news, let's talk about Planned Parenthood. They recently came under fire when one of their branches decided to jump into the meme game. You had a lot of people tweeting, we need a Disney princess who blank, right? All about inclusion, you know, like we need representation everywhere. Well, Planned Parenthood Keystone, which operates out of Pennsylvania, tweeted, we need a Disney princess who's had an abortion. They also include some other stuff like undocumented immigrant, union worker, but right up at the top, who has had an abortion. Planned Parenthood Keystone, what are you doing? You just went full Lena Dunham. You never go full Lena Dunham. Also, before moving forward, I'd like to pat myself on the back because that Lena Dunham comment works on 2 levels. 1, it's a modification of a line from Tropic Thunder, and also 2, relevant to this situation because there was that time that Lena Dunham said that she had wished that she had had an abortion. The main point, they put this tweet out there, they ended up deleting it. The head of Planned Parenthood Keystone responding, saying, today we joined an ongoing Twitter conversation about the kinds of princesses people want to see in an attempt to make a point about the importance of telling stories that challenge stigma and championing stories that too often don't get told. Upon reflection, we decided that the seriousness of the point we were trying to make was not appropriate for the subject matter or context, and we removed the tweet. And personally, I feel like this is pretty damaging for Planned Parenthood. I feel like the kind of mindset around it has been, you know, minimize abortion, right? It's not the main service we provide, it's about so much more, and then of course, yes, that. And in general, they have to fight off the idea of the woman that's like really pumped to get an abortion. But then they take this swing, which they think is about inclusion, but it really comes off as minimizing to many people online. But yeah, I guess the main point Planned Planned Parenthood learned here, and I feel like it's something that people should just live. You never go full Lena Dunham. Then let's talk about a story that has a sentence that is just an emotional roller coaster for me. The fantastic Donald Glover is writing and producing a brand new series that has already been greenlit for 10 episodes. Awesome. Yes, please. It is an animated version of Deadpool. Oh my God, this is amazing. And last week it got canceled. I was so excited, and then I finished reading the sentence. Reportedly, the series was canceled due to creative differences. This between Marvel Television and Donald and Stephen Glover. There were also people saying with Donald Glover doing so many things that maybe he was too busy. Well, this morning, Donald Glover tweeted, "For the record, I wasn't too busy to work on Deadpool." And that was then followed by 15 tweets, and in each tweet was a page from the season finale of this animated series. And the script has moments like Deadpool going to Africa to try to save the last male white rhino, talking to him about why the show was canceled after just one season. Was it because they were racist or because he made fun of Taylor Swift? Also adding perhaps it was because he called older fans pedophiles. There were also moments like right after he shot someone right in the head. The script says, "Deadpool to camera, take notes, teachers of America. Someday you'll have to make a high pressure shot like that." Seeming to be commentary about arming teachers. And after reading through it, so part of me wonders, okay, for Marvel Television, did they go, okay, wait, this is too risque for us? But also at the same time, there were things in the script that were so current that it makes me feel like Marvel Television had not seen this. Things like, Sine Lathan bit Beyonce's face. Wait, oh thank God, it was Jennifer Lawrence. I already hate her. It's fine. I mean, that's information and talking about pop culture that happened after the cancellation. So if anything, it feels like Glover was trying to show tone. But all of that said, I will say personally, it makes me sad that we have one less thing from Donald Glover in the world. As an at-time petty individual, I also appreciate Donald Glover going on his Twitter, which he rarely uses, just to drop 15 pages on a thing that's already been canceled. It seems like one of those situations where they wanted Donald Glover because he's Donald Glover, but they're not actually willing to let Donald Glover be Donald Glover. You know what I mean? But from that, I want to share some stuff I love today, and today in Awesome brought to you by Squarespace. If you need a domain, a website, an online store, make it with Squarespace. Squarespace's all-in-one platform is intuitive, it's easy to use, there is nothing to install, patch, or upgrade ever. And so if you want to make the smart move like many from the nation already have, you want to start your free trial, go to squarespace.com/Phil, and when you really like it, make sure you use offer code Phil for 10% off your first purchase. And the first bit of awesome actually involves the crypto world, specifically Ripple. Yesterday, they made the announcement on their website saying every Rippler from the executive team to our newest hires started their careers in one place, the classroom. It's in this pivotal setting that children's dreams are forged and legacies begin. In part, it's the teachers we encounter in our formative years that enable us to pursue ambitious goals like this. We're thrilled to announce that Ripple and its executive team are giving back to America's teachers with a $29 million donation in XRP to DonorsChoose.org. And obviously, this doesn't excuse any criticism around Ripple, but it is awesome to see something like this happen. Then, from the odd ones out, we got the video My Mom's Cruel and Unusual Punishment. We then had Emily Blunt and James McAvoy explaining a typical British day with Vanity Fair. We got a trailer for The Darkest Minds. We also got the season 2 trailer for The Handmaid's Tale. And if you want to see the full versions of everything, I just shared the secret link of the day. Anything I talk about today, links as always are in the description down below. And then let's talk about Utah and this idea of free-range parenting. And before we talk about what actually happened in Utah, let's talk about what free-range parenting is. In the most simple terms, it is parents letting their kids do more without their supervision. The term was created and trademarked by Lenore Skenazy, an author of a book called Free Range Kid. And in that book, Lenore talks about things like allowing her 9-year-old to ride the New York City subway alone. The book's website describes the parenting style as fighting the belief that our children are in constant danger from creeps, kidnapping, germs, grades, flashers, frustration, failure, baby snatchers, bugs, bullies, men, sleepovers, and or the perils of a non-organic grape. Lenore is also the president of Let Grow, which is a nonprofit that promotes the ideals of free-range parenting. That group's mission statement saying, at Let Grow, we challenge the idea that kids today are somehow more physically, emotionally, and psychologically fragile than any generation before them. Our projects help the culture see for itself how capable our kids can be once we stop overprotecting them. So what specifically happened in Utah? Well, Utah has now legalized free-range parenting. It was signed into effect on Friday. It's believed to be the first of its kind to legalize free-range parenting in the United States. And by passing this, it also redefines neglect in Utah. Under the new law, it specifies that kids who display maturity and good judgment are allowed to walk to school alone or play outside without supervision. And there is no age limit detailed in the law, and that seems to be on purpose. This way police and prosecutors can work on things case by case. And as far as why this bill was proposed, why they passed it, Utah lawmakers said they introduced this legislation after seeing cases in other states where parents were being investigated, they were being arrested for allowing their kids to do things alone. In 2015, a Maryland couple was accused of neglect after they let their children ages 10 and 6 walk home without adult supervision. That case sparked a national debate around free-range parenting at the time, and also that couple was eventually cleared of charges. In 2014, a mom in Florida was arrested for child neglect after she let her 7-year-old son walk to a nearby park alone. That charge charge was also later dropped. And back in Utah, Senator Lincoln Fillmore, the bill's chief sponsor, said he introduced this legislation to encourage more self-reliance among children, saying, "I feel strongly about the issue because we have become so over the top when, quote, protecting children that we are refusing to let them learn the lessons of self-reliance and problem solving that they will need to be successful as adults." Also stating, as a society, we've become too hyper about, quote, protecting kids, and then end up sheltering them from the experiences that we took for granted as we were kids. I sponsored SB 65 so that parents wouldn't be punished for letting their kids experience childhood. And this law will take effect as of May 8th. Now, the bill in Utah passed unanimously, but of course, not everyone is on the same page. While there are a lot of people that had the same mindset as these lawmakers, there were also many saying that this makes kids less safe. Some saying this will cause child predators to have a field day with our kids, disturbing, saying incidences of child endangerment will likely increase with this new law. Sure, children can be very smart, unfortunately adults can also be very evil. And I found this story to be really interesting because I'm a father of two, but one's about to be 4, the one's under a year, so I'm not really at this point, so I don't fully know what parent I'm going to become. I'm also in a little bit of a different situation than your everyday person just because potentially myself or my kids would be a little bit more of a target. And so I'm still kind of digesting how I feel about this, so I wanted to pass the question off to you. What are your thoughts around the idea of free-range parenting, right? The idea of like a 7-year-old walking to a park wherever. Are you for it? Are you against it? Are you protecting children or are you robbing them of experiences? With you guys, there's a lot of differences in age, backgrounds, and so I'd love to know your feelings on this. And then, I know we already talked about Cosmopolitan magazine being too sexy, but let's talk about possibly the sexiest story of the day, the 2020 census. Okay, I've got title and thumbnail on lock with this sexy story, but this is something that matters, and also now we're seeing new developments, so just to give you some context, what is the purpose of the census? What are the precedents here? Well, just to read it from the Census website, the U.S. Census counts every resident in the United States. It is mandated by the Constitution and takes place every 10 years. Adding, the data collected by the decennial census determines the number of seats each state has in the U.S. House of Representatives, and is also used to distribute billions in federal funds to local communities. And the census also collects demographic information about the population. You have things like race, income, members per household. And the reason we're talking about the census is that this week the Commerce Department announced that they would be adding a new question to the 2020 census, specifically asking about citizenship. And that was a big deal because this would be the first time we had a question about citizenship on the census since 1950. In almost every census from 1820 to 1950, the US asked citizenship questions in some form. You could also argue that it was kind of asked in 1960 because there was a question about one's birthplace. So that's why you see some people saying 1950, 1960. You also have some people saying 1970 because there's a long form and a short form, which I'll touch on in a minute. And as far as why this question was being added, according to Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross, it's to help enforce the Voting Rights Act. In an 8-page memo, he wrote, having citizenship data at the census block level will permit more effective enforcement of the VRA, and Secretary Ross determined that obtaining complete and accurate information to meet this legitimate government purpose outweighed the limited potential adverse impacts. Also writing that the DOJ and the courts use CVAP data for the enforcement of Section 2 of the VRA, which protects minority voting rights. And in the memo, Ross also tries to dispel any of the criticisms against this change, saying the reinstatement of a citizenship question will not decrease the response rate of residents who already decided not to respond. And no one provided evidence that there are residents who would respond accurately to a decennial census that did not contain a citizenship question, but would not respond if it did, although many believe that such residents had to exist. While it is possible that this belief is true, there is no information available to determine the number of people who would in fact not respond due to a citizenship question being added, and no one has identified any mechanism for making such a determination. Then yesterday we had some interesting comments from Sarah Huckabee Sanders, and when she's asked whether this is being used to target immigrants, she talks about the Voting Rights Act, and then she says,
and that information needs to be gathered, and it has been part of the United States Census every time we've had a census since 1965, with the one exception of the 2010 census.
So the thing is, that's not really true, and it's either some confusion or it's manipulation of a situation. One, censuses only occur every 10 years, so I don't know why she said 1965. Two, since 1970, remember I mentioned how that was coming back? Since 1970, the census has had a long and short form. And the long form of the census does have a citizenship question, but it is only sent to 1 out of every 6 households. And it appears that she's referring to the long form because she mentions 2010, which actually in the 2010 census, there wasn't a long form. And the reason for that is in 2005, the Census Bureau fully implemented this thing called the ACS. The American Community Survey, it is done every year. It is required by law. The ACS does have a question about citizenship, but it only goes to 3.5 million residents. And so because there was full implementation of the ACS in 2005, it seemed that that question in the long form of the actual census was negligible. So, Who's pushing back on this? We had Javier Becerra, the Attorney General for California, Alex Padilla, the Secretary of State for California, writing an op-ed saying this new question would both discourage non-citizens and their citizen family members from responding to the census, resulting in a less accurate population count. Adding, including a citizenship question on the 2020 census is not just a bad idea, it is illegal. California, with its large immigrant communities, would be disproportionately harmed by depressed participation in the 2020 census. An undercount would threaten at least one of California's seats in the House of Representatives, and by extension an elector in the Electoral College. Also adding, it would deprive California and its cities and counties of their fair share of billions of dollars in federal funds. And obviously what we're seeing there, that's just words, but what we've seen in the past 24 hours is this is now a legal situation. Yesterday, the Attorney General of New York, Eric Schneiderman, announced that they would lead a multi-state lawsuit against the new census question.
We know it would result in undercounts, it would result in injustice. It's unconstitutional, it's unlawful, and it's just plain unfair. So I'll be in court with a multi-state coalition of my colleagues from around the country to stop this.
Adding that he was doing this to protect New Yorkers, preserve a fair and accurate census, and hold the Trump administration accountable for violating both the 14th Amendment and the Enumeration Clause of the United States Constitution. And at least 12 states besides California have now joined the suit. And so if you haven't kind of gotten the gist of the people who are opposed to this, the general mindset is that the Trump administration and the country in general has been so negative towards immigrants. You know, we're talking about a time in this country where we're talking about the travel bans, we're talking about the repeal of DACA. Also kind of connected to that, at times we saw an increase in ICE raids. Based off of what happens with DACA, there are a lot of people that are worried that they or parts of their family are going to end up being on the wrong side of the law. And so due to fear of being targeted then or potentially being targeted in the future, immigrant communities just would not participate, and thus you'd get a lower number. Because you'd have that lower participation, it would affect electoral votes, it would affect funding for people that are actually there but just not being counted. And with all of that said, that is where we are right now, and I would love to know your thoughts on this. Should this be a question, or I guess more accurately, should this be a question that goes to every single household in America? Yes, no, maybe so. I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments down below. And that's where I'm going to end today's show. And of course, remember, this is the Philip DeFranco Show. It is not just a show, it is a conversation. So whether it be the last story, the first one, anything in between, I'd love to know your thoughts in those comments down below. Also, remember, if you liked this video, you like what I'm trying to do on this channel, hit that like button. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button. That way you make sure you don't miss these daily weekday videos, which actually, if you did miss yesterday's show, you want to catch up, click or tap right there. Or if you want to take a trip back in time, you can click right here to watch what we were talking about last year. But that said, of course, as always, my name's Philip DeFranco. You've just been filled in. I love yo faces, and I'll see you tomorrow.